Hey, what is going on, guys? It is your good friend Matt. We are back again here today at the only place that we always can be. And as you already know, that is Matt's Wrestling Collectibles right here on YouTube. Today, guys, a new episode of Casual Conversation, but this is going to be a 6-part episode. Just like the Vince McMahon docu-series, and we are going to go over each episode individually, one by one. We're going to hit a couple of topics out of each of them. We're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss a few things. Hopefully, you will leave some comments down below. Like this video, share this video, check out the channel, and subscribe, of course. But today, guys, we're just going to go over kind of my take on the events that we got to witness already and a little bit about this first episode. Leading into everything else that's going to come with it, everything that's going to come from it over the next, 5 episodes that follow to complete the 6. And I definitely think that so far, we are looking at probably a great documentary as far as some of the things that it is bringing to light, some of the things that it is discussing. But there is something that I do want to talk about with this as we get into this episode and as we start this right off and trying to jump right into this because I don't want to take up too much time in each of these. Obviously, it's going to be a lot to go over, but we want to hit those key points. So the very first thing that I want to talk about in this first episode is essentially just where we immediately kind of realized that there was a bit of a swerve here. There was a bit of a, we gotcha. We've got you sitting here. You're very intrigued. You want to know what's happening. And now this is where we give you kind of the big, slap right in the face right off the beginning anyway, at least the way I feel. And it was promoted and presented much different than what we are now able to see. And of course, this is just from the first episode. When this was presented to us and Netflix dropped the poster of this docuseries, it seemed to be more like we're really going to expose Vince McMahon. And I initially thought, okay, they probably started making this documentary very soon after he got all of this, stuff being accused, these accusations. And I thought that's where this is going to start. That's where we're going to really kind of dig into things here. And maybe there'll be a little bit of a backstory, but we're going to jump into this. So the very first episode tells the viewers off the rip from Jump Street that they recorded over 100 hours, which I have been doing a lot of digging, about a lot of looking online, seeing what I can find, and I have been seeing that it was actually more like 200 hours of recorded interviews. And it says right to us at the beginning, 100 hours plus of interviews between Vince McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, Triple H, colleagues, associates, all of that good stuff. And it lets us know off the rip, this started well before Vince was even accused of anything. So this documentary essentially was something that he was very much for. And the problem with this was when it was presented to us, again, the poster, the way it looked, the way it was being described, the way we saw these, I don't want to just say analysts and reporters, but some of these people that are doing the same thing I'm doing right now. I'm bringing this to you on YouTube. We, have a ton of people on YouTube that are very influential and, of course, influencers. They are bringing the story to you. Maybe not all true, but then again, very tough to be able to decipher what is true and false in a situation like this. What is in the ring? What is out of the ring? What crosses? What does not? And my big thing with this was once we knew that, I said, okay, so now things are starting to make more sense. For anybody who does not know, I was told that prior, 2 days before this was dropped, so Monday, that was prior to the Wednesday of this coming out, this Wednesday that just passed, I was told that Vince McMahon got in touch with Netflix and offered them a 7-figure offer in the millions, to buy this documentary back to be able to destroy it. Now, when that was brought to me, same thing. I said, well, they might take that deal because why not? They could make a lot of money from that and not even have to put a thing out. But then I started to say, well, wait, this isn't really making a lot of sense now once we figure out that this was recorded so much, so further back. And I think it's because of what is in the documentary, but I also think what really started to happen here was once this became what it was and this all started to take place, I think Netflix kind of changed the direction of it. And this is what we're going to talk about in this first episode. I was expecting to see a lot more about Vince's life. And when they brought this episode on, episode number 1, it is called Junior. And as we all know, I think Vince McMahon has made it even very clear he does not like to be called Junior. He does not like to be called Vince Jr. He does not like to be Vince McMahon Jr. And of course, not that I think it is the most, largest piece of information here. It's not at all. But Vince and his father, same first name, same last name, different middle name. And I'm actually not sure what Vince Sr.'s middle name was. And as I say, Vince Sr., but of course, just to make it easier to kind of go back and forth here. But I don't know exactly what his middle name was. I believe it was Eugene. I could be wrong. I think it was Vincent Eugene McMahon. And, of course, Vince Jr. being Vincent Kennedy McMahon. So I don't know exactly, again, how much that really matters. But at the end of the day, I know Vince McMahon has been very adamant over the years. I think that he's not a junior. I feel like he has tried to pave the way as being like the real McMahon that did all of this. And of course, it is very true, and that's one of the things that I think we see throughout this docuseries, which is, the fact that Vince really did take wrestling to a whole other planet, a whole other experience that was just outer world. And the entertainment aspect is exactly what he was going for from day one. And I think that was something that at first maybe his father didn't exactly like. But of course, as time goes on, if you are progressing and being successful, I think anybody's going to eventually say, hey, you're doing a good job. And of course, we'll get to that. But in this whole beginning, Vince starts off, he talks about how he lived with his mother and a stepfather in a trailer park. And that was the first 12 years of his life. Said that he was, heavily abused. He didn't get into too much detail exactly. It was just more so that, hey, every day I was abused. Every day I was, as he said, the shit was beat out of me. And also too, it was actually kind of a little crazy to be able to hear Vince McMahon on a interview where he is actually swearing. For so many years being in that public eye. I mean, yes, he's had a couple of lines on TV, but again, it's all, charismatic character work. And so I definitely was a little bit kind of surprised, just because, when you start to hear him kind of talk like the person that he probably is in day-to-day life, or maybe he's putting on a work again, or a shoot, whatever, for this camera, for what he's sitting in front of. And of course, more so a work than a shoot, but it's just it's just very different setting for Vince McMahon. And as he progresses to talk about his childhood, he doesn't really get into a lot, doesn't address much with his mother, doesn't address much of the stepdad, doesn't really address much of it. And one thing that he said that I really took very heavy on the heart was, he said, you live with it until you get out of it. And that is just, I hate to say it, but it's just such an old mentality, because nothing like that would go on the same way today. And not to say that people are not getting abused, by all means. It's unfortunately still going on everywhere and right this very moment. But it's the fact that that is a much older mentality. Of course, men growing up back in that era, and even, I would say up until probably like the late 90s, maybe even early 2000s, somewhere around there, I think men were always kind of more so addressed as like, hey, your problems are your problems. You don't talk about it. You don't say anything about it. You don't cry about it. You don't do this. You don't do that. And I'll be the first person to say that when it comes to mental health and anything along that line, especially with abuse and stuff like that, if anybody is listening to this, please, by all means, get to a resource for help. Somewhere, some way, it is out there, and there is somebody out there that wants to see you do the best that you can do every day. And not only do they want to see you do the best, there's a lot of people around you that want to see you do your best. And I myself want to see everybody that is watching these videos succeed, prosper, and have, great days ahead of them. So definitely in that regard, if you're in that situation, try to find the resource for help, because you look back at something like the way Vince McMahon is speaking, and it's just so sad to hear that for 12 years, we don't know exactly what he went through, other than he had the shit beat out of him. But was there more? Because people were talking, and there was some speculation of some other things that were discussed. And of course, we're talking 100+ hours of interview time. In the course of the entire 6 hours that we get in watching this, how much of it is, I don't know how I want to say this, but how much of it is Vince directly talking? So if you break it down and there's so much more, I would imagine they were only going to put in what made the most sense. And again, with all of this, it just seemed as though we weren't getting a lot of backstory. He then kind of jumps into how he met his father at 12 years old, and, he expected to run up and give him a big hug, and, I guess that's not really the way it went. It was kind of more like a, hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. But don't get too close to me. Don't be too close to me. And, once Vince Jr. realized that Senior was in this amazing position of power and having, the WWF, it was something that I think he instantly gravitated towards, as he claims that it was something that once he knew it was what his father did, it brought the passion for it out of him. And, you also look at these things that are going on at that time, the promotions, the territories, all these things that he's doing. And he said, when I sat down with my father, there was no talks of how are you, how are things, what's going on with this, social life, none of that. It was talking about business. And I think he said, that basically started right around the age of about 13. So, you figure now it's a couple of years down the road. They're at a show one night. The announcer's basically demanding more money. Says if he doesn't get it, he's going to walk. And Vince Sr. tells Vince Jr., get on the announcing. Get on that commentary, whatever it may be. Go ahead. You're the announcer. Get out there. And in a small clip after that, I think it was not, I can't say word for word, but I believe Vince on the, cut screen as we're about to start filming, back in the day now I'm talking, he says something like, ready to go, Pop? First take. Here we go. Like, let's do it. And you could tell it seemed that he was very much interested in continuing to please and hopefully make his father proud. So doing everything that he was doing in this industry so quickly, it was, I don't want to say it was frowned upon to others, but I think, some people probably had a good idea, like, hey, this kid already kind of has the leg up because he comes from the man that's paying the bills around here. He is his son. He is essentially a junior, as as we are calling that in this episode and the title of the episode itself. But it's I think it is very much evident that as much as Vince wanted to be like his father, I think he realized very quickly that he wanted to be an even bigger promoter and an even bigger force in the in the industry, in the business. And I could be wrong. I think Vince was like 40 when his father passed away. I want to say, I'd have to double check with that. That'll come, into another episode. But I believe Vince was about 40 years old when his father passed away, somewhere around that time. And, it's one of those things where you see Vince take this from a small territory promotional standpoint and is now building it and building it and building it. And now he's starting to promote in the territories that, the imaginary lines you don't cross. Well, now guys are getting upset with that. And infamously, in this interview, he says, they were telling my father, Vince, your kid's going to wind up at the bottom of a river. And Vince says, I don't know what it was with these promoters, and they just really love the bottom of rivers. And then Vince goes on to say, but I continue to do what I did. He goes, and I didn't, pay attention to any of these threats. And because, as Vince said, you don't own it. It's not yours. You don't own the state that your wrestling is in. You're not the owner of the state. You're not the owner of anything but that organization, and that organization could go anywhere it wants. And I think his whole thing was, as much as he would love to say it wasn't about taking people's livelihoods away, his goal was, if I can monopolize these territories, and let's just say there's 10 territories, his is one, there's 9 others out there. Well, now if I conquer those 9, and I take the best stars from the 9 and I bring them in, and now they're stars under my organization, under my banner, I now get rid of all the junk, and I have the best of the very best. Every draw that is out there is now my draw. And of course, that comes very quickly with none other than Hulk Hogan. And this is kind of where we really start to jump down the line here. But now we're talking about Hogan, who was originally under Vince Sr. He wound up leaving, I believe. He did the Rocky 3 movie. I'm not sure if I'd have to double check if that was... I think the Rocky 3 movie was a year before WrestleMania 3 or 2 years before WrestleMania 3. So between being there for Vince Sr., being rebranded, becoming Hulk Hogan, then wanting to do the movie, leaving, doing the movie, coming back under Vince Jr., and now being at WrestleMania, WrestleMania 1 and being basically the main attraction. And I mean, really, at the end of the day, Hogan was the main attraction of WrestleMania for, what was it? 7 years in a row? 7 or 8 years in a row? I mean, you could even, I guess, maybe say 8 or 9 years in a row when you talk about the little finessing, I guess you could call it, at the Coliseum, WrestleMania 9. Definitely not a great memory, but one that we all unfortunately have to live with. But it's just very evident that once Vince knew he had all these top guys and he had Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan was the banner of the banner. It would almost be like saying, what is Chevrolet? What is Chevy? Corvette. It was like the WWF was Chevrolet, the WWF is Chevy, or the WWF is General Motors, and Hulk Hogan is the Corvette. It can't get any easier. It's he is the flagship, he is the money draw, he is what everybody wants to see when it comes down to it. And especially in 1985, I'm sure that was a very good comparison at the time. But it's exactly that. It is the fact that Hogan was the man who made everything happen. I mean, as much as Vince had all these ideas, and I'm not discrediting Vince McMahon, but somebody has to portray it. You say to yourself, if Vince McMahon came up with the Hulk Hogan gimmick, put it on himself, and went out there, I mean, would we be in the same situation we are right now? I'd probably say no. But again, what a great mind for this business is Vince McMahon. What a great mind for this business was his father. What a great mind for this business was and is Hulk Hogan. This is the things that you have to really see kind of being just put right in front of you in these episodes. And it was evident that without Hulk Hogan, I don't think the WWE, the WWF, would have had the same success under another person's, run, another person's push to the American people and the public, because that was the thing. And, like they were saying, it was a different time. It was a different era. All the good guys are Americans. All the bad guys are from other countries. And that's what the world was at that time, unfortunately. Movies, TV, the news, anything you saw at that time was America versus everyone else, because that's what it was at that time. Especially you're talking with the way that this is going and where this all kind of began. You're talking the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Some of the biggest times where you could just play the role on America and it was a guaranteed ticket seller, on top of the fact that now you have Hulk Hogan always in this role of the baby face, the guy who's going to go over. And it's actually funny to think, because when you do go back to it, WrestleManias 1 through, WrestleMania 6, Hulk Hogan did lose to the Ultimate Warrior with the, infamous 3-count pin kick out, because he kind of like kicks out at 3 to be like, well, you got me, but you didn't really get me. You had me, but you kind of didn't have me. It could be whatever you want it to be. But Hulk Hogan definitely has built the business. And as they go into this, like I said, there wasn't a lot that really broke down his previous life, his childhood life. There was a little bit. There was the stuff about meeting his father, getting into the business, growing the business, getting to the point with his father where he said, okay, you're getting ready to get rid of it. Let's make a deal. I'm going to give you a payment up front. I'm going to pay you 3 more payments. It's going to be the total in 4 payments, I think he said, or 5 payments. And basically, as Vince said to his father, if I pay you all the payments and on the very last payment, the day it's due, I can't pay you, you keep all the money and you keep the business. You do what you want with it. I'm out. And Vince Sr. already had the idea of selling it to Gorilla Monsoon. And God, where would we be if that was actually what had happened? That would be so crazy to think the change, the difference in what would have been. It would have never been this McMahon thing that we've, known for so long. And it's so crazy because it's, and I don't want to get too much into it because, of course, there's so much more to come, but it's just crazy to think of how much of it's kind of, starting to really to end and to be over. But thankfully, we do still have some people in power, some people in place, and I kind of feel like even with Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and Stephanie still being involved, I kind of feel as almost like it is still the McMahon regime, but it's a little different, So, but as we were saying here, progresses with him buying the business, changing a lot of things, stepping on everybody's toes, but doing what he had to do to make an absolute empire, a mecca, something that would live forever. The whole build it, and they will come. It could not be any more true with Vince McMahon. And as we saw this progress and him build into these big shows and build into WrestleMania and doing all these elaborate high-end things and changing the territories and changing so much, I will say that episode 1 was good